Welcome to Asian Book Club, where we highlight Asian and Asian American authors. We are your hosts,
Jamae and Sabangan.
and I'm Stephen Park. And today we bring you our third read of Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. And in this read, there's one of those scenes, well, it's kind of an extended scene, where we go to two different parties, which one of them, well, I guess technically three, but two of those parties are bachelor and bachelorette parties.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Jamae and I, you and I, have been engaged for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, we are going to go through with a wedding.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, we've talked about what a bachelor or bachelorette party might look like for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had different thoughts and opinions on it. I'm curious if any of those have changed or if you can tell the listeners what your ideal bachelorette party might be.
Well, when I think about a bachelorette party, I feel like I fall under the typical, well, I guess I don't know if it's typical anymore, but I want to have a party where there's dancing and there's music. But then after thinking about it, when you say ideal, I think now of having a girls' night in a cabin, warm and cozy, and just drinking wine and reading books.
In a cabin
Well, somewhere nice and lush.
where things can happen to you.
Well, not that far out.
I think for me, a bachelor party that is ideal is kind of counterculture to what a lot of the bachelor parties are now.
Mm.
And for me, it just doesn't entice me to go to one of the clubs that people go to. I think now that I am on the older side of being a bachelor to be groom, I don't see that aspect of kind of drinking heavily and going crazy as something that really entices me.
Mm.
And so for a long time, I've said all I've wanted was just to hang out with my two best friends and then go somewhere, maybe a cabin or somewhere like Catalina Island or just a place that we could rent out an Airbnb and just hang out, talk, like, I don't know, watch sports, watch a movie, which is kind of what we've done for a lot of the times when we would hang out together. So I don't know if it necessarily needs to be different. We've also talked about combining bachelor and bachelorette parties and doing something where because both of my friends are married to their spouses now, so kind of doing something where all of us can go out together because it's not really because for me it's not really having to be a bachelor for the last time. Like we've been together for a long time. It's
Yeah.
more just a celebration of going towards the next step.
Yeah.
I did finally think of a new idea that I really want to do, but
Mm.
I don't think we have enough money for. But if I was a crazy rich Asian, where I would take my friends is to Dodger Stadium, and there are seats right behind home plate, and they have to
Mm.
be like $1,500, $2,000 per seat.
Wow.
So you go down, and then in that area, there's a whole catered section, but we're not talking hot dogs and cookies. We're talking steaks and like prime rib, mashed potatoes, like actually amazing foods made by chefs there. And then
Totally.
there's free drinks, there's everything that you would possibly need, and you just take it to your seats and you can watch the game from extremely close to the point where the players can
Mm-hmm.
hear you. I was lucky enough to actually sit in one of these seats at one point, which was by far one of the most amazing experiences that I've ever had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I would do is have my friends come with me, sit in those seats, and then in the evening maybe, I don't know, turn it into a weekend where we're just hanging out, but that would be
Yeah.
a part of that weekend.
Totally. That sounds like super exciting, but the price tag definitely is not within range, I think.
Yeah, but still, someone can dream.
Yes, we can still dream. We can still hope that maybe money is going to plop in our laps and we'll be able to have our ideal bachelor, bachelorette, Jack and Jill party.
I mean, you're just going to a cabin. We just need like two pieces of plywood. We're good. But that's just an event, something we want to live up. But for people that want to revamp maybe their lifestyle choices and kind of lush it up, you can check out our recommendation for the week.
Our recommendation for the week is Kat, who is a lifestyle influencer whose primary focus is sustainable fashion, books, and writing. I came across Kat's work via Bookstagram. And for those of you who are not familiar, Bookstagram is the book section of Instagram. And Kat even moderates her own book club called Between the Covers Book Club. You can learn more about the book club on Instagram at Between the Covers with Kat or join the club on Fable. You can also learn more about Kat's work through their Substack at catontheinternet.substack.com and on Instagram at Catherine Ann Chiang. That's CATHERINEANNECHIANG.
Yep. And for my recommendation for the week, it's just cats. All cats.
Yes.
But with all those, that is going to be our recommendation for the week. Okay, so on to our third read of Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. Now, before we get to our current read, what have we learned so far?
Okay, so far, Eleanor tries to rally help in order to figure out who Rachel is. Rachel and Nick arrive in Singapore, and Astrid is struggling to accept and adapt to Michael's possible affair.
Right. And with Rachel and Nick arriving to Singapore, their main purpose is for Colin, Koo, and Araminta Lee's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the hurdles that they're going to get through is Nick's grandma's Tanhua party.
Yes. And the tanhuas are these flowers that bloom once in a lifetime.
Right. They're specifically very limited. The blooms only happen for a short period of time, so the ability to see them not only is supposed to be auspicious and give you good luck, but
Mm-hmm.
is very rare for most people.
Yes, and so this tanhua party is a bigger party than Nick anticipated, and it's at Amma's house on Tyersall Park, and which we know is in the middle of the botanical gardens
Hmm.
and is not on the map. It's this big, very big, 50 acres it seems, according to Picklin, 50 acres of land and a huge house.
Right. So you said it's a bigger event than Nick thought, but for me, I just think it's a bigger event than Rachel had imagined.
I think that both of them didn't think of it as being as big as it was going to be.
Really? I felt like Nick knew. I feel like Nick has had to have gone to these parties growing up. I feel like he must know what Alma's house looked like. And even as Rachel and Pecklin had shown up, he didn't seem shocked by the extravagance and the amassed people at this party.
For sure. And I think while reading at least, Nick mentions to Rachel that, oh, there's a few more people than expected.
I feel
So,
like that's BS, though. I feel like that's Nick trying to play down the entirety of
mm,
the party. I feel like that's him being in this role so often and trying to tone it down so that Rachel doesn't get scared off.
fair, but even if she were to get scared, where would she go? She's kind of stuck here.
Yeah, but in my mind, Nick is trying to make her comfortable, and by toning it down, at least mentally, I'm assuming that he's wishing that she wouldn't be as afraid in terms of her internal battle with having to meet all these new people and how many people she'll have to meet.
For sure. And Rachel meets not just Nick's family members, but family friends.
Right, right. And one of those people is an auntie that Rachel accidentally thinks is Nick's grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
which causes a lot of trouble for Rachel. I mean, I think, I don't know, that's a big oopsie, is to
Yeah.
call someone older than they are, and that's a version of calling someone older than they are.
But they are a great aunt. So the auntie that you're talking about is the sister of Amma. So they're the same age, or not the same age, but they're in the same generation. But I think the oopsie is this is not her house, this is not her party, so she is not the one being honored.
Right, right, right. So she meets Amma, which is a whole experience in itself, but not really that memorable. I mean, besides the fact that she gets greeted, Rachel feels a little bit out of the circle with Amma just kind of going back to her previous conversation. It's really not much.
Right. It's not as big of an introduction as we might have thought it would be because Amma seems to be this person who's so honored and so well known.
Right, right. She also gets to meet her old friend Astrid. She is introduced to several other people, but one of which is Oliver Sien.
Mm-hmm. Oliver Sian is the cousin of Nyx, and he's a very interesting character in that he's an art distributor of some sort.
Right.
But not only that, he's also very keen on the relationships and the goings on of the family.
Right. He seems to be the main gossiper. Now, from previous reads, what we know is that there was that other character, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, who is the best gossiper. Like her gossip,
Cassandra, Radio 1 Asia.
yeah, she is the one that everyone can rely on that gossip.
Mm-hmm.
But Oliver seems to be the person that is spreading the most. He seems to have a lot of the backdoor information, but maybe we can't always rely on it being correct or incorrect.
For sure. So, do you think that he has an ulterior motive, considering we learn a little bit later that Jacqueline, a family friend with her own intentions of pairing her daughter with Nick Young, speaks to Oliver about the possibility?
Mm. I mean, possibly, but for me, I feel like Oliver and Rachel have formed a somewhat real bond within the mess of all this. Oliver seems like a person that isn't maybe as rich as everyone else, and
Mm,
so I think meeting someone that is in a closer social class maybe bonds them together as closer friends rather than someone that he is gonna maybe backstab in the future.
I don't think he's gonna backstab her, but I do think that he's gonna use the information that he's getting
Mm.
against her. I don't know if he's gonna use it to lure in Eleanor Young, or if Eleanor Young is going to vice versa, lure in Oliver to get to Rachel because of that connection.
Mm. Well, we won't know until we get later into the read, because in this read, Oliver hasn't even met Eleanor yet. Well,
Hmm.
they know each other, we just haven't seen that interaction yet.
Right.
But someone else that we talked about at the party was Astrid.
Hmm.
But Astrid isn't at this party with her husband Michael because there is an affair going on, or at least an assumed affair from everything that we can gather together.
Right. Well, at least for this party, he's saying that he's at work.
Right.
And Astrid is assuming that he's having an affair, which means that Astrid's brain is not necessarily at the party, it's somewhere else thinking about Michael.
Right. And that's where we get the flashback of Astrid and Michael first meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So their first meeting was actually where they hadn't talked or interacted
Interacted.
with each other.
Yeah.
It was more that Astrid had seen him modeling, and then just after that, she's able to meet Michael in person at a party, and that's where their sparks kind of cross paths a little bit.
Right, exactly. And at that time, Astrid seemed to be very bold, very confident, so much so that she dares to call him in the middle of the night.
Mhm.
And when she calls, at first she does hang up, but when Michael calls her back, he invites her to see him and she goes.
Right. And at this point, Michael's also a pretty big ladies' man. He
Mhm.
is someone that is very much able to charm women and doesn't ever feel like he needs to approach them, I guess. He's very used to women approaching him.
Right.
And so at this party, as they're meeting, I don't know if Michael's necessarily even interested in Astrid based off of the text that we read,
Mm-hmm.
because there are talks that he might have only been interested in her because his friends didn't think that he could get a girl like her.
Right, exactly. And it seemed like it was an unmatched duo, really.
Right. So what do you think about that whole pairing?
I think that both of them were in it without actually wanting to be in it.
What do you mean?
So I think with Michael, he's only going after her because he's not in her league. On the other hand, Astrid is going after Michael because he seemed shy or wasn't much of a talker because she knew that he didn't need to chase after other women. So I think both of them were just going after each other because they're not their usuals. What do you think?
I feel like they fulfilled the needs of each other at the time. And for me, the reasoning for Astrid maybe going after Michael was much more because her last relationship had failed with Charlie Wu.
Hmm.
And Charlie Wu was a marriage or an almost marriage that was a lot more based on status and who his family was
Right.
rather than Michael was the exact opposite. So for me, Astrid needed Michael to be that person that broke the barrier of
Mm,
having to fit into society's role and model.
right.
But yeah, I agree. I think Michael was only after Astrid because of the fact that she was this challenge that his
Hmm.
friends had posed against him.
Hmm. Totally. So, with all of that in mind, do you think their marriage might unravel by the end of the book?
Yes,
Hmm.
I absolutely. I mean, he's already cheating on her in this read. We also,
Allegedly. Allegedly
yes.
cheating on her.
In this read, we also see how much Astrid is starting to grow from being the person that's been cheated on. So
Mm,
initially, she tries to cope with the fact that she should live with this and be okay with it because this is the society that she's in and it's common, rather than where she ends up as we get towards the end of this read, where she kind of starts thinking this is not okay. This shouldn't be the role that she puts herself in or puts Cassian in.
mm-hmm, absolutely. So that brings us to the flash forward back to the Tanhua party.
Mm-hmm.
Astrid usually stays over at Amma's place whenever the parties go late, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead, because she doesn't want to be a victim of an affair, Astrid races home with Cassian after the party to ensure that Michael has returned from his work trip without a mistress in tow.
Right. And so we don't really know what happens after she arrives home. We have yet to get to that part. But do you think anything will happen in this moment?
Well, we are left with a cliffhanger. We know that once they get home, it seems like Astrid and Cassian get into a car accident, but we don't know exactly what happens afterwards.
Okay, but what do you think is going to happen? Like, do you think Michael is going to end up having some signs of cheating, or do you even think Astrid is going to make it home?
I don't think Astrid makes it home, but I mean, in my mind, I think because there's no news about her that Astrid does make it home.
Mm-hmm.
But based on how secretive her family can be, she might be incapacitated and we just are not filled in because no one else is filled in.
Mm. Yeah, possibly. The other things that we talk about in this read are some secret social circles going on.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones most relating to this party is Eleanor's. So Eleanor Young, Nick's mom, is not attending the Tenhua party because of the fact that she didn't want to quite meet Rachel yet, so she was eluding the presence of Rachel. And instead, she goes to a hidden shopping vacation in China and goes there with her study group, her Bible study group.
Right. And they go there not only to go shopping, but also to have like a spa day, but for Eleanor's purposes, to get more information on Rachel.
Right. She has this whole thing planned with a friend helping her talk to another friend who knows something about Rachel. But as they're going through this, they end up in a shopping center that has a lot of high-end fakes, and Eleanor ends up running to an old friend, Jacqueline,
Yes, and Eleanor finds out that Jacqueline's daughter Amanda is going to be attending the coup wedding after all.
which is like this big faux pas because Jacqueline wasn't getting along with Araminta, I think.
Right.
But secretly, I think Eleanor does want Jacqueline there because it seems like Eleanor wants Jacqueline to maybe end up with Nick if possible.
Amanda, because Jacqueline is the mom.
Oh, right, Amanda. But maybe Eleanor also wants Nick to be with Jacqueline.
I mean, Jacqueline looks young according to the book, so who knows?
Right. So we haven't yet gotten to the part where Eleanor meets up with her secret friend, but that seems to be the drama that ensues there.
Mm-hmm.
We also get to see the bachelor and bachelorette parties that we were talking about.
Yes.
So Rachel is going to be attending Aramenta's bachelorette party, and they're flying to Eastern Indonesia. They're having all this extravagance where Aramenta's mom has created this whole private shopping situation for all the girls.
Mm-hmm.
But the bigger thing is that Rachel, who is pretty much individually at this party, is having to deal with all of these people that are trying to figure out who she is and then judging her and really just making this experience just kind of hell for Rachel.
Exactly. They're just catty and gossiping and not being kind to her. The only person who's actually talking to her is Araminta.
Which kind of stinks because it's one of the reasons why if there's a wedding or something like that that I have to go to where I'm only going for the person who is hosting the event, I
Mm-hmm.
usually don't like going to those things because you barely get to see those people.
Right.
So even for Rachel, who has Araminta there, who's the main reason why Rachel's at this event, she's not going to be able to split all of Araminta's time because
Mm-hmm.
Araminta needs to see everybody.
Right.
So Rachel is kind of stuck on this island of finding out this information that everyone's really gossiping behind her back and very much judging her.
Exactly. So that leaves Rachel alone in this resort with a bunch of mean people.
Right. So speaking of mean people, let's talk about Colin's bachelor party.
Mm-hmm.
I hated this event.
It was so yucky.
I mean, not only were the people there really awful. Like they were using the N word, they were using slurs against the LGBTQ community, specifically the gays. There was really awful events like the underground dogfighting rings. None of it sounded like something I wanted to be at nor participate in.
Exactly. Which is terrible. It was all terrible. And this kind of got me to thinking, although these are characters in a book, can we separate the art from the artist here? Can we separate the characters from the writer?
So for me, this kind of hit some personal traumas in terms of friend groups that I used to grow up with.
Hmm.
And it's one of the reasons why I avoided hanging out with Korean people for a long time, is because it very much felt like this. Like it felt like to fit in, I needed to listen to music a certain way and I needed to talk a certain way and use a lot of curse words or do this. And like it's never really been my vibe. But for the purpose of fitting in, I would do that. And I would pretend that boxing each other was a really cool thing to do, but I always hated it. And I think for me, this hit a little bit harder. But ultimately, I think I can still separate the art from the artist, but it doesn't mean that I don't find this gross.
For sure. It was harder for me to separate the art from the artist at this point because I know that vulgarity is a part of this character and I totally understand that. But it felt like just shock value to me.
Mhm.
And I already get that this character, Bernard, is not a great person. We know that from the flashback, we know that from the party at hand, and we get it. So I don't think we needed those words. We didn't need the extra trappings.
I agree. I do think there's probably a certain amount of this ingrained into the author.
Hmm,
I would assume that we are about the same age or grew up at least around the same.
generation.
Yeah, like a very similar timeline. So at that time in the 90s, this way of talking was very much normalized.
Hmm,
And so I don't know if this is just a more natural portrayal of what the author might have seen
mm-hmm,
and what he may see in groups of guys bonding together.
mm-hmm.
What I did enjoy was the counter to that, which was Nick fighting back and saying, I don't want this, and this is not my scene. You can have and go on with this as much as you want. And I don't know if the importance of the author putting in how awful these situations were. It's kind of like when you see a murder scene or something of that nature, it ends up being really graphic so that we can get to the other side of seeing, in this case, Nick's protagonistic nature of being the good guy or the better person.
Mm, totally. I can see that.
So with that, we kind of get to the end of our third read. We get to see these three very different parties that are hosted for very different reasons, but we see the various personalities that go into what build the characters that we're currently forming.
Mm-hmm.
What have you thought of this read so far?
For this second part of the book, I feel like it's about unveiling the parts of this society, unveiling the parts that we don't see on the surface. So, just like the parties, just like going to Alma's house, just like Asher trying to figure out what her husband is doing, these are all unveilings.
Right. I think for some reason, though, there seem to be these other parts of the story that don't quite need to fit in, but all it does is introduce us to more character development, maybe. One of them being Eddie, Fiona, and the children, and
Mm-hmm.
that whole scene of them getting ready for the party and the strictness that Eddie feels like he needs to have with his family and like laying down the laws. Really weird. And I
Yeah.
forget, there was another part where I was just, I didn't see the purpose of that being the story. Oh, it was a part with Jacqueline. It's okay, maybe it does come back later where
Mm-hmm.
we see her daughter and it affects the relationship between Rachel and Nick. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I was like, okay, what's the point of Eleanor meeting Jacqueline for this? It didn't seem like it was massively necessary to the story.
Right. It felt a little extraneous.
Yeah,
It felt like, why are we here?
right. Are you enjoying the read so far? How are you feeling about Crazy Rich Asians as we approach the second half of the book?
I don't think I'm enjoying it as much as I thought I would, especially with what we talked about with the vulgarity, with the shock value. I'm still speeding through it,
Mhm.
but I'm more curious of how it's going to end.
Right. I think I agree. I think the read of it is very easy,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm on that same page where I think maybe my expectations were too high. I don't like the way that the characters are being portrayed. I kind of am more disgusted by more of the characters and not. I feel like the elegance that I saw with Eleanor in the movies and with even Astrid, I saw Astrid as a stronger character in the movie than in the books. And so a lot of that makes it just not feel quite as whole as I was hoping that it would.
For sure. It doesn't have the wholesome quality we were expecting, I guess.
Right.
But on top of that, the elegance of being a rich person is overshadowed by the ugliness.
Right. And I can say that this book goes into so much more details about the thoughts and the decisions and the life processes of each individual character.
Yeah.
So, from that aspect, you do get to see more of the ugliness of the people who are rich, which is
Mhm.
probably more true to nature.
For sure.
But we'll continue on with this book anyhow. It's not a DNF. I
No.
think Jamae had thoughts of DNFing this one, but I said let's try to push through it. And so we have two more reads left. Our next one's our fourth of the fifth read. And which pages are we reading next?
We're reading on the physical copy pages 262 through 349, which for everyone is chapters 11 through 18 of part 2 and chapters 1 through 2 for part 3.
Yep. And for anyone that has any thoughts on this book, we recently met someone that said she loved this book and the entire series.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I didn't quite agree with her, but I kind of also just nodded along because that's who I am. It's very shy when things come to that. But if you have any thoughts or things that you want to share, how can people reach out to us?
Y'all can email us your thoughts at asianbookclubpod@gmail.com, or you can follow along in the conversation at Asian Book Club Pod on Instagram.
Yep, we also have our website, which is asianbookclubpod.com, which has our bookstore, which has books we've read in the past, books that we plan to read, and books that we recommend.
And a great way to support us is to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast.
Otherwise, make sure to be happy, be healthy, and read a book.
Ingat!
Bye.
Bye!